So after the kind of heavy theory lecture, let's now actually see HTTP in action and do some requests and take a look at the responses we get using our browser's developer tools. So I'm using Google Chrome as my browser and I'm here on udemy.com. So just go to udemy.com and then open your developer tools. And I'm using Command Option J for that on my Mac. On Windows, it's probably Alt Control J, or just right click anywhere on the page and then click Inspect. Okay, just in case you're not familiar with the DevTools. Then what we're going to do is to head over to the Network tab and then click here on Disable Cache. That's important because otherwise you might be loading the page from your computer because you've been to udemy.com before. Okay, so let's now reload the page so that we're gonna kind of record the network activity here in this network tab. So reload this. And so now here we can see all the requests that are happening on the page. So as I told you, there are going to be a lot of requests for all of the elements that are on the page. Now, if we're going to the top here, the first of all is actually udemy.com. And we can see here the status code, which is 200. As I said in the last lecture, that means okay, so everything went right. Then the size and the time it took to download this resource. But then we also have all of these other resources here, like the CSS files you see here, some images, JavaScript files, like you have here. And all of these were actually initiated by the index, so by the root page. Okay, so we have udemy.com, and that one will then request all of these assets. So that is the index, so it doesn't have an initiator, and all of these here were requested by the main udemy.com. Now, if we click on one of these resources, and let's do the actual udemy.com first, here we can get some more information about the request and the response. So first, the request, which is actually at the bottom, and you see that the request was made to udemy.com. We did a GET request, and the path was just the root path, just like I explained you in the last video. Okay, then we have a bunch of headers. So this here, for example, means that the page was compressed using this gzip. Down here you have a header for setting some cookies, and a bunch of other headers, and which we will talk about later on. So this is the request, and then the response also has a bunch of all of these headers. Okay, so we can see when the response was actually sent. We can see a bunch of cookies and the status code here as well. So that's where the 200 status code comes from. And again, a bunch of other headers that we're going to talk about a bit later. Okay, and the same, of course, we have for all the other assets that were downloaded. So the response and the request down here. And this time we actually see that the root here is still udemy.com, so what they call the authority here, but the path is then all of this, so this location here where the CSS file is located. And if we actually now browse somewhere here on this page, let's say to the web development courses, well, then let's see what happens here. And so here we have this page, which is the web development resource. Okay, so basically this piece here of the URL. Remember that this is called a resource from the last video. So if we click on that, we will actually see that here again. Right? So we have again udemy.com and then /courses development /web development. So that is the path where the request is going to. Here on the left side, we can also like preview images. For example, this logo here. When it's an image, we can see the preview. We can see the response a bit better. For example, in this one here, we can actually see the HTML response that came back. So instead of just seeing the headers like we did here, we can actually see the response as well, and a nice overview of all the cookies that were set in this request. Now we didn't talk about cookies just yet. But again, that's something for later. But I think it's important that you get this overview of how requests and responses actually look like under the hood. So that was exactly the goal of this video. I hope the message was clear and that everything made sense. And so let's now move on and continue talking about backend development in general.